right, so what we're going to talk about here is the ALTA ACSM land title survey for this particular piece of property. And these are nice if they're part of the plan set because they provide a lot of detail and good detail that will help us with the control of the site, the property location, and what the existing conditions look like. So these are very, very well detailed. There are certain requirements put on by the American Land Title Association, the American Congress of Surveying and Mapping. And the surveyor on record has to adhere to those, or they get a knock against their licensing, could possibly get some repercussions from that. So they're very particular. Most surveyors are about these types of surveys. They're very detailed. They do take a lot of work, a lot of research, and a lot of effort. You can see that this one actually starts off with its own cover sheet that's incorporated into this plan set. And, there's a bunch of notes here that you can read through about, the history of the property, I think, and, how the surveyor went about, putting some of this together. Most of it, probably the key aspects on this page, if we look at it, is, let me scroll over here, is one, the surveyor certificate. So it shows, how the survey was made in accordance with, the certain standard detail requirements and which numbers apply. So, that's what these items are here. But probably the most important piece on this one, this sheet here, I can zoom into it, is this survey legal description. And basically this tells us the boundary information of this property. And it tells us, where it starts, which is this nail found in pavement. So that tells us that there was a nail in the ground, in asphalt or concrete, whatever, the pavement happens to be at this location. Then you can see here that it gives us a bearing and distance. So we could use Business Center to actually lay out and draw in this boundary based on these values. We can also see here that they set a 1/2-inch rebar in the ground. So we could actually use that if it's in a good location, possibly as a control point to check into or to calibrate off of if we got good coordinates, which we should have on an ALTA ACSM land title survey. We should have that information. I'll show you that in the next page. If we zoom out a little bit, you can see who the surveyor is. If you've got any questions, you can always contact them. And most surveyors are willing to give in. If they miss something, they'll give a coordinate or some other value in some regards. It all depends on your surveyor. So if we take a look at the next page, this is the actual map or plat of that survey. And we can see here we've got a property line, we've got some bearing and distances, and that's this line coming around here. And if we look for that point of beginning, that's where that reference is to that the previous sheet here, to this note where it says beginning at nail found. So if I zoom in to this down here and we come over here, you can see that they even said nail found point of beginning. So that's where it begins, and it's going to go in either a counterclockwise or clockwise direction. If we look at the bearing, we can see that it's southwest. And if we look for our north arrow, which is up here, southwest is in this direction. So we know that we're going in a clockwise direction. So it's going to go this bearing in this distance, and you can see here's a 1/2-inch rebar set. So we'd be able to start at this point and go to that point and find that rebar, and then we should have a good coordinate on that rebar that we could use to set up control on, or even to calibrate and measure in. If we look a little bit closer, you can see there's this number 3 in this triangle. Usually if you see something like that, that refers to a survey control point. And if we come over here, we can see there's actually is some survey control. So they use the existing nails of the property corners. So 2 nails that they found, and then this mag nail set in the concrete. So number 1 and number 2 is probably this point right here. And then if we follow that property line around, we can see we have another one up here. So actually that's the number 1 nail that they found. So there's 1 point. It actually even shows it as a benchmark. So that usually what that indication is, that symbol. And then over here we have another one, got benchmark B. So they have two benchmarks, which is required on a ALTA survey. And then you've got number 2. So you've got 1 and 2, which could be used for control points, as well as this rebar set, which, based on, putting in this boundary, we'd be able to calculate what the coordinate is of that, even though they don't necessarily show it here of northing and easting. We can figure it out. And then we've got the point of beginning, but we do got an additional control point number 3, which we could use. So we could set enough control around this project and do a calibration on using this information. Here's a elevation for the boundary, so we know we've got an elevation to tie into for both, actually 3 benchmarks. So this one here is a chiseled square on the corner of a drop inlet. So we'd have to find that drop inlet on here, and it's probably identified by that same symbol. So if we were to come up, we got one benchmark there, another benchmark there, and there's our other benchmark right there. Right? So there's a storm structure there that's got a chiseled X. That would give us our elevation to check into. You also notice on this survey there's all these easements. So it kind of tells us, where the easements are. You can see there's a water line here. And this is all existing conditions. This is the existing road, in sight. So very detailed, a lot of good information that we can use, floodplain information as well on this particular project or on this particular plan set. So this is a good survey. This gives us a lot of good data to kind of lay out the location of our site. Go ahead and do a site cal and really start demolition if we needed to go out there with it. And if we had to, even lay in some additional, erosion control measures, we'd have the site laid out with good calibration in that case. So that's what an ALTA survey actually provides. So the survey is going to give you, ideally where the property boundaries are, hopefully some benchmarks, hopefully some type of control that the surveyor used and basically the designer is going to design on the same system. So theoretically, this should all tie together if you got good data. So the next set of data that we'll get into is the actual grading plan in this case.